Good morning, everyone. Welcome to VUS TESOL Webinars 2020. This free webinar series is held by VUS with the participation of ELT experts and invited speakers from well-known publishing houses, such as Oxford University Press, Cambridge Assessment English, National Geographic Learning, and Macmillan Education. We hope to bring you the most updated and practical teaching methods and techniques so that you can teach your class more effectively, especially during this coronavirus pandemic. Okay, so before we continue, can I check if you guys hear me well? And if yes, please tap OK in the chat box. Thank you. Yeah, it seems that everybody can listen well. So thank you for joining us in today's webinar, Delivering a Manageable Student-Centered Online Class, presented by Mr. Stephen Happel. Before we start, please be informed that there will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Also, I will send you the links for you to complete a survey about this webinar and to download your certificate of participation for registered attendees. And now, let me introduce to you Mr. Stephen Happel. He's been teaching English for more than 15 years. He started to work at VUS as a teacher, later become a senior teacher, and then senior academic manager. He specializes in both curriculum design and teaching training, running in-house workshops for professional development. Besides, Stephen also works as a trainer for British Council teacher training workshops. Stephen received his BA in philosophy with honors from the University of Minnesota, later earned teaching certificates in TEFL and TESOL, and is now obtaining a Master in Applied Educational Leadership and Management through the University of London. Okay, now over to you, Stephen.
Great, thank you. Kwok, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Kwok?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, I'm just waiting. I will be active in the chat. I will be looking at the chat. So if you want to interact with me a little bit, please feel free to open up your chat box and answer questions if I have questions for you or activities or something like that. So the first thing I want to do here is actually, as more participants are rolling in here, I want to share something with you. And if you can, I'm going to ask you to do a little homework right now, actually. Let me know if you can see that. Can you see the menti.com page here? I'm going to ask you, if you have a second device, you can do it on your phone or something like that. You can go to menti.com, join with the code that you see there. And I've just got one question here. What are the main differences and challenges between teaching online versus teaching in the classroom? If you type something in, if you join and type something, we should be able to see it on menti.com. Don't type it in the chat box here, type it into the Menti screen if you can, and we will see it. So as you guys do that, and as more participants join here, I want to tell you a little bit about me and my job and this workshop, how this workshop came to be. TPR good, somebody's in menti.com right now. As Kwok mentioned, I am a teacher, I'm a teacher trainer. And as I was designing this workshop, so I do a lot of training for all the new teachers that come to VUS. And one of my jobs is making sure that classes are engaging, they're dynamic, they're interactive. And that's a huge challenge, especially for new teachers. If you're used to like a typical environment from high school or from college, it's usually the professor or the teacher at the front of the room, and then all the students are sitting there maybe taking notes or something like that. So one of the things that's key for me is getting teachers used to student-centered teaching and what that means and how to do that. And as I was designing this workshop for creating a student-centered online class, I was using a lot of my resources and a lot of my experience from observations and from the workshops that I've been doing with new teachers. So if you've been a VUS teacher before, and if you've been to one of my workshops, some of this workshop will be quite familiar to you. And I think that's a good thing, because a lot of what I teach new teachers for creating a student-centered environment in a real classroom, that also applies for online teaching. Obviously, a lot of the activities, a lot of the things that you do, you can't do online, but much of the same principles will apply. And so that's good news. That's good news for some of us here. It's important that we can draw on our experience, and we can take what if you have experience in the classroom, you can use that experience and bring that into your online classes, okay? I have a lot to say today. I'm not sure how well the timing will go on this. I'll try to go quickly through some parts and maybe take my time at other parts. So I'm just kind of cruising through Menti here. We've got a lot of interesting ideas. Students' engagement is the main difference. The challenge is class dynamics, TPR, keeping younger students engaged, background noise, class management. A lot of these are great ideas here. Some of them are the same. Activities. No distance. I'm not sure exactly what that means, no distance. Limited interaction in online classes. That's one of the problems, is increasing student talking time is a lot easier in a actual classroom, right? Students' engagement, I've seen that time. Collaborative learning, working in groups. I'll talk a little bit about that today. Good, okay. So what I'm gonna do is pop over, stop sharing that. Let me share a different screen here. Actually. All right, that should be, hopefully. All right, are you guys looking at my key ideas? Yes, okay, good. So this is what I'm about to show you. These are the key ideas that I want you to take away from this webinar, this workshop. And this will also be the structure, the loose structure. I might do some different things if you guys ask or if you want, but this will be the loose structure here. Be visual and dynamic. You will probably get bored of me mentioning this and talking about this. I am going to mention this again and again and again. You'll probably be tired of me saying it by the time I'm done here. So be visual and dynamic. And again, like that's one of the key things that I talk about in new teacher workshops. You got to be visual in the real classroom, and that's, I think, even more true in an online class. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means, being visual and dynamic. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Be enthusiastic. This is a big part of classroom teaching, right? You have to be enthusiastic. I think it's even more true online. You can't be boring. I tell all my new teachers, one of the most unforgivable things you can be is unenthusiastic, because your students will mirror you. They will mirror you. They will be boring if you are boring. They will be enthusiastic if you are enthusiastic. You cannot expect your students to bring energy into a classroom or into an online classroom if you are not enthusiastic. It just, even if you are an introverted person, as soon as you start teaching, switch. You're an extroverted person. You are Mr. or Ms. Enthusiasm. Sell it, sell it. Again, minimizing teacher talking time, maximizing student talking time. These principles apply in a real classroom. They also apply online. I'll spend a lot of time doing some activities with that. And keep it simple. I used to teach online quite a bit. I had some coaching that I used to do, and the more I did, the more I taught online, the more I realized you have to keep it simple. You have to keep your expectations fairly limited. You can't be doing really fancy things online. The simpler you keep it, the more memorable, the easier your lesson will be. I mean, keep in mind that a lot of your students, English, they don't have a lot of English. You can't sit there and talk to your students like this. I assume all of you in this webinar right now are teachers, right? So if you are teachers, I assume that you can understand what I'm saying. I'm trying to go a little bit slower. If you're teaching students online, you have to keep it as simple as possible. You have to keep it slow. Your target language needs to be minimal and slow. Everything, your teacher talk time has to be minimal and slow. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about keeping things simple, keeping your teacher talking time low, paced, and graded, okay? All right, does everybody see a picture of a workspace here? It should say your space. Does everybody see that? Okay, good, good. This is my first activity here that I want to do. So we're just going to do this through the chat box. Take a look at that, and you have a question here. What are the key items for your workspace? And I'm just going to go one by one here. So number one, what is number one? I'm not necessarily saying these are in any order. Miss Farah, I think that might be Farah from Hanoi, right? Correct. Coffee is the most important thing of an online lesson. Coffee is very important. My classes do not happen without coffee. That's my fuel, that's my petrol. A glass of lemon juice, come on, coffee. I'm in Vietnam, I assume most of you are in Vietnam. A coffee is absolutely crucial. Yes, that is a nerdy joke, I know. So number one. Number two, what is number two pointing at there? Yeah, a microphone. If you are recording for YouTube or something like that, that becomes a little bit more important. I think most of you can probably hear me fine. I'm just using my computer microphone right now. It's all right. If you do have like a USB microphone, they're not that expensive, and it does kind of raise the quality of your audio a little bit more. But for my purposes for teaching online, I usually just use the microphone on my computer. Number three. Light, obviously, light. Light is absolutely crucial. It's so important. And I will tell you, I'm broadcasting live. I'm actually out of the US classroom. I wish I was doing this webinar from home right now. I really wish I do. The problem is, and this is actually something I'm going to mention a little bit later, the reason I'm not doing this from home is because I have a 4-year-old son who is absolutely crazy. And if I tried doing this at home, it would be a disaster. So I had to come in and do this at VUS. And when I got here, my room was dark. I mean, the lights were on. As you can see right now, all the lights in this room are on, but it's not enough. It's not enough at all. Your light, you can almost never have enough light. And this is a really big part of keeping students engaged. If your face is dim and dark, I'll talk about this again in a little bit. If your face is too dark, your students tune out, they will stop listening. Your face has to be right there and it has to be lit up. So lights are very important. How about number 4 here? Pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, camera, very good. You don't need a fancy camera. I'm just using right now, I wish I could show you, but I'm using the webcam that my computer came with. Number 5, computer, laptop. Yeah, I would not try conducting online classes from my phone. Probably not. I mean, like, you do want a laptop. Number 6. Not really monitor. More specific than screen, it's something that happens on your computer. Yeah, somebody said it there, Zoom. You need a platform, right? You need a platform for teaching. I'll talk a little bit about that, not too much time, but whether it is Zoom or Skype or ClassIn, you need a platform for connecting with your students. I'm doing this one right now over Zoom. Zoom is very easy to use. It's very self-explanatory. I'll talk a little bit about platforms in a second. But yeah, you do need a platform. And the last one, number 7. Yeah, not just books. It's books, it's flashcards, it's visuals, something that you can show. If your students are following your lesson with a book, it's very helpful to have the book that they are using with you. So keep that in mind. How about anything else? Is there anything else that you guys, if you've taught online before, anything else that you feel is crucial to teaching online? Teaching materials. A mini whiteboard, very good. A mini whiteboard is very, very useful to have. And a little hack that you can use. If you don't have a whiteboard, if you have like a clear folder like this, you can write on a clear folder and it will show up. A sense of humor, crucial. A strong internet connection is great. If you're teaching this workshop is going to be specifically devoted to younger students. Puppets are great. Puppets. Everybody keeps saying an internet connection. Yeah, you really do need a good internet connection. Mini whiteboard, somebody mentioned that. Realia. I assume that's what you mean by teaching materials. Yeah, you do need some good materials. Props, Realia, yeah. PPT files, again, I mentioned visual. Being visual is a huge part of teaching. We do need some visuals we can show our students. All right, I want to talk a little bit about your student space here. So we have a space, the teacher has a space, and your students have a space. Some of this, some of this is not up to you. Some of this is not up to you. I know you can't control your student space, but you can tell your students, if they're old enough to understand you, you can tell some things that you want, or you could tell the parents. I don't know your context and if you have a means of speaking to the parents here, but you do want a way to kind of set up your student space. Distractions are the disaster that happens in an online class. And this is one of the key differences when I was planning this workshop. It's one of the key things that I thought about when I started designing this. When you are teaching in your class, if your student is distracted with a pencil or a book, or they're talking to a friend or something like that, you know immediately what's distracting them and you can fix it right there. When you're teaching online, you have the view of their webcam and everything else that's happening off screen you don't know. You don't know what they're looking at, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know what they're doing with their hands. So the more that you can free your students' distractions, the better your students' participation will be. Mindful of parents. As you can see in my little webcam picture there, in my little screenshot picture, this was a real class. This is VIP Kid, and that's a Chinese platform. I don't know if you're aware of it. You probably are. The parents can be distractions. When I have taught online with younger students, I've had a lot of parents that want to sit there. They want to sit there and they want to maybe feed their child the answers for the teacher's question. They want to prompt their child to answer the questions. They're too busy arranging things, and the students can get distracted. And if you can tell parents, like, look, I want you to be helpful, but I don't want you to be hovering and helicoptering over the lesson, that can be very distracting. And the last one, your students might need supplies, right? If you want your students to have books or pencils or paper, you have to tell them, like, I expect you every class to have a pencil and paper. So that's part of setting up your student space. Really, the key is minimizing distractions. It's also a huge part. I'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but when you are in a real classroom, you're trying to set up an activity. What happens if you give your students a handout and then you try explaining the activity? What happens? So you're trying to do an activity. Yeah, it doesn't work. They don't listen. The second you give them something, if you give them a handout, they tune immediately into the handout. If they open their books, they're looking directly into the books. They're not listening to you anymore. This is the same principle for teaching online. If you have students, you've lost them already. If you're teaching from a book, whether it's in the classroom or from home, the second your students open that book, their attention is gone. You don't have it anymore. So directing your students' attention is a huge thing. All right, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the platform here. Just some features to consider. The participant layout. If you are teaching only one student, consider yourself very, very lucky. If you have a lot of students in your class, the layout is crucial. Do you want a grid layout? I love the grid layout. I like to see all of my students in the classroom. Screen share. Right now, everybody is looking. I designed this workshop on Google Slides. Maybe you use PowerPoint or something like that. You want to be able to share what you are looking at with your students. An interactive whiteboard. I could do this right now here. Let me try this. I'm going to share something else here with you right now. If you are in Zoom, oh, it's actually not a feature in the webinar. If you are in a Zoom meeting, let me go back here. If you're in a Zoom meeting, you have an interactive whiteboard that you can use, and your students can actually use it too if you allow them. But it's nice for me to be able to type something for them immediately or draw something for them. That's the purpose of an interactive whiteboard. Mute controls. Mute controls are big for me, especially the younger the age that you go. The younger the age, the noisier students tend to be. And if they are just constantly interacting with the microphone, speaking into the microphone, doing something that's noisy, everybody can hear it. Everybody can hear it. So you want to be able to kind of choose what they can hear. When I'm speaking, I mute all. If you got a good class, maybe it doesn't matter. But if you have noisy students, when I'm talking, they are muted. If I want two students to work with each other, I mute everybody else. When I'm drilling, and I'll mention this a little bit later, I still do drilling with my students because I think it's a good way of getting everybody using English at the same time. A good way of drilling is to have all of your students just mute. You say it, they can hear it, but they can still say it. Breakout rooms, this is a feature of Zoom, and it depends on the age group of your students. A little bit, it depends on the age group of your students because you can't have 5-year-olds working alone in a breakout room. A breakout room it's a virtual room where you could have 2 students work together. If you got a class of like 12 students, you could have 6 breakout rooms where it's 2 students in each room. You can't do that with 5-year-olds, obviously. But the older that you go, if you've got maybe 11 or 12-year-old students or something like that, and you think they're mature enough to do it, you can put them into breakout rooms and assign them an activity to do. Alternatively, and again, I don't know your context. I don't know your context, but if you have a TA, if you've got younger students and you have a TA in your Zoom classroom, what you can do is you, the teacher, you take half the students to one breakout room and your TA takes the other half into a breakout room. You do it, you assign an activity, they are both doing it at the same time, right? You're doing it with one group, the TA, the teaching assistant is doing it with another, and then maybe you assign 3 minutes, after 3 minutes, you swap, you go to the other classroom, your TA takes your classroom. And that's a way that you can really use breakout rooms, even with younger students. And that's a really good way to maximize student talking time. Because you think about it, if you got 12 students in your classroom and you have to deal with all of them, a lot of the students are sitting there waiting for their turn. But if you can cut that in half, there's a lot more student talking time. Uploads, maybe you want to be able to share something with your students, upload a PowerPoint or something like that. That's useful. A chat is cool, just like right now. I'm looking at your chat. I'm looking at your chat right now, and I can interact with you. There's a lot of cool things you can do with students on a chat group. Younger students, 5 years old, 6 years old, maybe not, that might distract a little bit from the lesson. But if you're dealing with like 8, 9, 10-year-olds, you can do a lot of games where you just have them type the answer into a chat box. For example, I'm going to be using this for my example lesson I'll refer to a little bit later. I'm going to ask you guys right now to type the answer. Let's do a race and let's see who's going to win. Let's see who can type this first. What do you want? French fries. That was Michelle, I think. All right. So Michelle is you get a point for your team. Chips. I am not. Do I sound English to you? No, I'm American. Come on. All right. I mentioned lights were very important. I want to talk a little bit about this. Just 1 second here. And I'll talk about lights and I'll talk about your face and body language. So I mentioned when I got here, my room was dark. I brought a little ring light. You can probably see it in my glasses here. Can you see the reflection of a ring light? I brought that ring light from home. That's one of my things that I have for my online classes. I'm gonna turn it off for a second here. Can you see my face darken a little bit? And there it's back on. You can never have enough light. You can't. It's just, you need a lot of light, and the more the better, frankly. So be properly exposed. That means the picture on top that you see there, that guy he's got a window behind them and that makes him dark. That is not compelling. It's not fun to look at. Your students won't be able to see you very well. And you are going to be the most interesting things your students will see. right? You can share screens, you can share PowerPoints, but you will be the most interesting thing your students are going to see. So keep that in mind. Your face has to be lit, properly exposed. Close to the camera. I see this a lot. When I observe teachers, a lot of teachers are kind of, they're maybe this far away. And you know, like right now I'm sharing a screen with you. I'm sharing a screen, so I'm probably a little window on your platform right now, on your device. I'm not close enough to the camera. You can't see me very well. It gets darker the further that you get away from your light, and you're gonna start losing your students' interest. The closer that you get, I mean, if you're right in front of the camera, I mean, maybe your students are gonna, maybe you're a little bit shy or something like that. You're worried about what your student's gonna think of you sitting a little bit too close to the camera, whatever. Who cares about the amount of pores on your face? Whatever, get close to your camera. It's more interesting, it's more compelling, even if you're ugly like me. Keep your eyes on the camera. Your eyes are your students' eyes. When you look in the camera, that's you looking into your students' eyes. If you're looking around the whole time, I mean, your students might lose attention a little bit, right? Again, I'm gonna mention this again and again. Be enthusiastic. Be enthusiastic. The more that you can use facial expressions and gestures, the better your class is gonna be. Talk with your hands. In a real classroom, I'm constantly talking with my hands. You can use your body language, your hands to communicate visually really, really, really well, a lot more than you think. For example, let's talk about, I'm not even gonna tell you what I'm teaching right now. What am I teaching? What's the concept I'm trying to teach you right now? Small, okay, this is small, and this one, what's the concept here? Tiny, okay. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to say anything. You guys got small, and then you got tiny. You can convey enormous amounts of information just by using your hands. Just a word about your voice. So everybody can see the scale here. The scale from 0 to 5. Just like in a real classroom, right? You want to project your voice. You want to speak a little bit louder, and that's so students can, in the back of the classroom, they can hear you. If you're too quiet or too passive, or you're I don't know, you just want to engage students, and part of that is speaking with slightly normal volume. My normal volume is probably a 2. When I'm doing an online class, I'm probably 3. If I really want to get students listening to me, I need to be 4. I don't want to be 5 probably, because your microphone might be sensitive and you might blow out the microphone and it just becomes not that good, clean audio. But 3 or 4 is right where you want to be. Clear, paced. What does that mean, paced? If I say paced, keep your language paced. What does that mean? Yeah, it's talking about the speed. Very good, Jessica. It's talking about the speed. So if I am speaking too fast, your students, I mean, keep in mind your students are second language learners. They're not going to be able to keep up with you if you're talking like this to them. I'm speaking like in a normal pace right now, maybe a little bit slower, but I'm trying to speak as slow enough that you can understand me. If you're dealing with 5 or 6-year-olds, you're speaking slower than usual, slower than normal. And again, that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. It might make you feel that you're treating your students like children, but speaking slow enough for them to understand you is a part of getting your point across and being understood, making yourself understood. Graded. What does that mean to grade your speech? The level, yes, Mr. Duck got it. The level. It's, yeah, simplifying your language. If you're teaching elementary students, you're dealing with them at an elementary level, right? If you're teaching advanced students, you can use more complicated vocabulary. You can use more complicated grammar. This is something that's true of an online class. It's something that's true of a real classroom in the when you're a new teacher. That's hard to figure out is the right grade to deal with your students. Keeping it brief. I'm probably kind of just rambling right now. In a real classroom with real students, whether it's online, whether it's in a real classroom, you got to keep things short, simple, to the point. Keep it simple. Keep it really simple, really short, really concise. All right, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about TTT. I could talk forever about TTT. I could waste a lot of TTT talking about TTT. Being visual. Being visual is a very good way to minimize your teacher talking time. Can somebody complete this expression for me? A picture is worth what? What is a picture worth? 1,000 words. Very good. Lauren and Sarah, you got it. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So don't try to use your words to explain something if you don't have to. Use pictures, use videos, use your body language, your gestures, your facial expressions to be as visual as possible. Because I think there's maybe two reasons here. Number one, if you're dealing with young learners, and I'm trying to talk specifically about young learners here, if you're using language to explain things, your students probably do not understand the language of your explanation, the language of your definitions. And number two, the more you talk, the less time your students will have to talk. It's a balance, right? It's a balance. More teacher talking time equals less student talking time. So you want to be very mindful. You want to be very mindful of how much you're talking. You don't want your instinct to explain things orally if you don't have to. Use visuals. I'm going to do that. We're going to spend more time doing that in a second here. Let me go back a step here. Focus on target language. If I'm teaching for an hour, that's not a lot of time for me. And most of that time needs to be spent using target language, not just for students, but for you, because your students are going to copy what you are doing and what you are saying. The more that you can use the target language, the better your class will go. The better your class will go, because your students are going to start using that target language as well. Repeat frequently. When I observe classes, one thing that's common to most good teachers is that they are constantly repeating themselves. They're asking a question, and they're not rushing to answer the question. You know, I'm sure you've dealt with this before, right? You're in your real class, you ask a question, and then you get nothing in return. You get silence in return. A lot of newer teachers or inexperienced teachers, they're just gonna rush to answer your own question, because it's kind of, I don't know, silence is uncomfortable. It is like you speak something, you say something, you expect a response, and you don't get a response. That feels uncomfortable. So most teachers, a lot of new teachers, will kind of rush to answer it. Repeat it. Repeat it again. Repeat your question again. Maybe rephrase it if you have to, but keep repeating things that you want your students to say. Embrace silence. Don't be uncomfortable. And elicit frequently. Call on your students. Don't just, I mean, this workshop, it's a lot of me talking and a lot of me presenting. So this isn't how I would really conduct an online class. In an online class, I'm going to be calling on students to answer questions quite frequently, but not lengthily. And what I mean by that is, I'll call it teacher-student mode. So teacher-student mode means you, the teacher, ask a question, and then you get an answer. You, the teacher, you ask a question again and you get an answer. And then it goes back and forth. It's teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. And that feels very busy for you. That feels like your class is very engaged, but that's just you and one student at a time. And that's just kind of a lot of teacher talking time. So to get around that, I see a lot of teachers do that. They fall into a trap of just question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And that's too much teacher-student. The ideal way of getting more student talking time is student-student, student-student interaction. It's harder to do in an online class, it really is, but the more you can do it, have two students interact with each other, the better it's gonna go. And that's where the beauty of a breakout room kind of comes into play here. If your students are working together in a breakout room, great. Even if it's with a TA, cut your class in half. 2 breakout rooms, you in one, the TA in another. That's a lot more student talking time. And the last one, practice in pairs, I just mentioned that. All right, I want to talk about being visual a little bit. Sarah, you just had a good point there. Model with one student. Yeah, model it, and I'll talk about this again in a second, model your activities and then try to have 2 students do it together. Can everybody see this? This is a definition here. A noun, an instrument for writing consisting of a thin stick of graphite. What is it? What is that? Hui, you got it. Yum, you got it. Tao, you got it. That is a pencil. Is that how you teach the word pencil? Do you give a definition like that? No. You're not going to give a definition of it. What are you going to do? A picture, okay? You could use a picture. What's even better than a picture? Realia. So I don't have one here. If I'm teaching the word marker, I'm going to show a marker. If I'm teaching the word pencil, I am not going to use words to explain something that I don't need to explain. You don't need to explain what a pencil is. You need to show your students what a pencil is. The next one, verb. This is a verb, to move at a regular pace. To move at a regular pace by lifting and setting down each foot in turn. What is that? Not jump. It's walk. Very good. Some of you got it. If you're teaching walk, what do? Do you give them the definition? Mime it. You could mime it. You could try to do that. You could show them a GIF image. I mean, you can demonstrate it, right? I'm not going to do it right now, but you can stand up and you can actually walk for your students. Again, the point here is that you're not using words to explain things that you don't have to. Use images, gestures, whatever. Another definition for you. Anybody? Cow, very good. I'm not going to use that definition to teach the word cow. What am I going to do here? How do you teach? A picture, great. Anything else? Use sound, you could definitely use sound, very good. The last one here. Idea, very good, Kate, that is an idea. Can you show an idea? How do you show an idea? Yeah, sure you can show an idea. How do you do it? You could use a picture to show an idea. A thought bubble and a light bulb, very good. You show a little light bulb above somebody's head. Could you use a facial expression to show an idea? Sure, you could. You can. I mean, I'm thinking. Got it. You can use images, gestures, miming for all of this stuff. So let me go through some of these techniques for being visual. Flashcards, pictures, videos, realia, miming and gestures. I just mentioned all of those. If you've been to one of my new teacher workshops at VUS, you probably know exactly what I'm about to say here. So who is the most well-known comedian in the world? Who's the most well-known? I didn't say the most, yeah, Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean. I think Mr. Bean is the most famous. Why? Why would everybody around the world know him? Chaplin is also a good one and also illustrates my point. Both Mr. Bean and Charlie Chaplin, they don't speak at all. They use gestures, body language to convey their meaning, to show what they mean. Can you understand what they're saying? Can you follow the story? Yes, absolutely you can. I guarantee you, I promise you, Mr. Bean and Charlie Chaplin would make excellent teachers in Vietnam. They would make excellent ESL teachers wherever they are. Some techniques for eliciting here. Simple closed questions. If you're dealing with young students, you don't want to ask them wide open questions. Ask them simple questions where there's just a limited number of options. Maybe yes, no questions. For example, you ask your student, what did you do last week? Oh, that's a very big question. Maybe your students don't know what to say because it's wide open. You can use yes, no questions instead. Did you go swimming last week? Did you meet your friends last week? Now it's closed. Now it's just simple yes or no. Pause mid-sentence. This is an eliciting technique. So if I said, for example, milk comes from a cow. Okay, you guys got it. Pause mid-sentence. Very good. Mouthing words. I mentioned this again in my new teacher workshop. You can mouth words. If I'm teaching, let's say I'm teaching transport, okay? I'm teaching transportation and vehicles. I want to play a little game with my students where I'm going to say something, but they're not going to hear me say it. They just have to read my lips. And you could actually use the mute function on this. So we're teaching transportation. What form of transportation am I saying right now? Bus, very good. Next one. Car, very good. We'll do one more here. The most difficult one here. Let's do a difficult one. Grab bike, it is boat. What kind of boat? Speedboat. Very good, Miss T, you got it. It's a speedboat. Synonyms, antonyms, these are just good ways to elicit some of the concepts. So how would I teach these words? What techniques? You're teaching eggs. How do you do it? How do you teach eggs? What technique do you use? Pictures, yeah, definitely pictures. Island, how do you teach the word island? I'd probably use a picture, maybe a map, very good, Kate. I'd probably use a map for an island as well. Chew. Act, I would mime that as well. Yeah, I'd probably mime that. Job. Job is, all right, let me give you an example of something that might happen. If you're teaching the word job, and you only showed them a picture of a doctor, what might your students think? Yeah, they might think, very good. They might think that the word job means doctor. That's a problem. Human beings were very good at recognizing patterns and contrasts. So if I'm teaching the word job, I'm probably going to show them not one job. I'm going to show them doctor, teacher, hairstylist, or something like that. I'm going to show them a lot of different jobs and like, okay, all of these things, these are jobs. Surprised. How do I teach that word surprised? Facial expressions, absolutely. Surprised. Dream. Last one here. Could you mime dreaming? Picture, I think you could do somebody sleeping and maybe like an image popping out in a thought bubble. I think you can use pictures for that. Maybe you could mime it. Ballet. How would you teach the word ballet? Picture, yeah. You could probably mime it. Ballet is probably the one I would not mime, just because I'd be too embarrassed. I'd probably use a video. I'd probably use a video for that one. All right, let me go back. Maintaining attention, being visual, being dynamic and not static. So let me give you an example of what that means. If I shared my screen and I showed you one picture like this, and I didn't change it, that is visual, but that's not dynamic. And you have to be very, very careful here. Dynamic means you have to keep things shifting and moving a little bit. It's not enough just to be visual. You have to move around. So right now you are going to be naturally dynamic because you can talk like your hands, like you can talk with your hands. The students can see your face moving. That is dynamic. Being visual is good. If you share a picture or whatever, that's very good. But you can't just leave a picture on a screen for, even 1 minute. That might get a little bit boring. So keep things shifting around and moving a little bit. Elicit frequently, I mentioned that before. Shift frequently between activities. You can't do a 10-minute online activity. That's 15-minute, that's hard. Have a naming system. This is one of the most difficult things, I think, for teachers to do that are dealing with multiple students in a classroom, in an online classroom. If you're dealing with one student, you know what? This actually might be a problem even with one student. If you're a teacher that's new to Vietnam and you don't know how to say your students' names, that's going to be a problem because you want to call on your student, but you have no idea how to say their name. In a real classroom, you can walk over to the student, you can look at them eye to eye. In an online class, your students have no idea who you are looking at or where you are, what you are doing. This is a problem. You either need to learn your students' names, how to say it very well, or choose names that your students can understand and recognize. One of the things that you could do is attach like a vegetable or a fruit to their name. So maybe it's their name is Tommy. Tommy begins with T-O, so now it's Tommy Tomato. Maybe your student is Ben, so now it's Ben Banana or something like that. You need to know your students' names, or you need to give them names that they will recognize. And in a platform like Zoom, you can rename your students. But you definitely need to have a way to call upon your students and have them understand you. And actually, let me stop this. I'm actually going to share this with you right now. I think I have it open. Share. Oops. Nope. Go back to my share screen. Let me hold on here. Sorry. All right, here I am. I want to introduce you to the most brilliant website. You guys are going to thank me later for this. My computer's starting to slow down a little bit. Oh, it's locking up here a little bit. Okay, can you guys see what I'm seeing here? Can you guys see a wheel? All right, my chat is locking up a little bit too. So the brilliance of this is if you need to call on a student, you don't know your students' names very well, you can go to this website. This is called wheelofnames.com. You can spin a wheel. You just type in your students' names in the window over here. You type it in. Oh, Tao, it is your turn. And I'm going to show you another way to use this in a second here. So let me go back to my presentation here. And I am locking up. Please move there. All right, I hope I am back in my presentation here. Oops, let me go back to that last one. Have a transition system. So to maintain students' attention, and when you want to go to your next activity, or if you are setting up an activity, the problem with setting up an activity, if your students are not paying attention, well, they have no idea. This is the same thing in a real class. If you're setting up an activity and you have some students who are not paying attention, you're wasting your time. You have to re-explain the instructions again. You have to do everything over again. You need your students' attention. So it doesn't matter what activity you are doing, get your students' attention. One of the techniques I would do with this, if I have multiple students in my class, you teach them this one. So finger on the nose, the last student to put their finger on the nose, they have to do something. Maybe they have to stand up and dance, turn around or something like that. But that's a good way of getting your students' attention. Introduce that early to your students. All right, let's talk a little bit. I'm running a little bit out of time. Here. I just want to talk about, get into like an actual lesson and how you would present it. And I need to be a little bit careful here because my computer's starting to freeze up a little bit. This is getting to the point of creating a student-centered class, creating an interesting class depends on your context and what you have, the resources you have available. So you could be delivering your class through a presentation tool. So at VUS, in my context, we are using books from Oxford, Everybody Up. And when you're teaching in a real class, you have a classroom presentation tool. Let me see if I can share this with you without killing the computer and freezing it up here. Can you guys see what I'm seeing here? What do you guys see? You guys see the interactive software here? I mean, this is a really good way to introduce language for your students and to run a classroom. You can zoom in, all of the language is here for your students. I've got structures over here. So this is one method that you can use to deliver your class. But I mean, maybe you're a teacher that doesn't have this. Maybe you don't have that. So let's look at some of the other things that you could possibly use. Flashcards. Let me actually stop sharing this. I'll tell you what, I've got flashcards here from a lesson. Do this here. I've got flashcards from one of the books that we're using. I'm actually more, yeah, somebody mentioned Quizlet. That's a really good idea too. I'm actually more, I'm more fond of using flashcards than I am iTools. I like using flashcards a little bit more. I feel it gives me a little bit more control. When I share my screen, my window, my face becomes smaller. And remember what I mentioned before about being visual and dynamic. All right, well, when you share your screen, yeah, I know teachers don't have flashcards at home. This is going to depend on your context. It really depends on your context. You can make your own flashcards. I mean, draw a picture. I'm a horrible artist, but I could probably draw eggs. I could probably draw most of the vocabulary my students need. Not always, but usually. But if you do have this, great. I like this a lot more than iTools because I get to keep my screen a little bit bigger and I have more control. I can show them the picture and I can turn it around here. They can actually see the word then. I always start with the images though. I like this a little bit more than sharing iTools. Google Images. Somebody mentioned, yeah, you don't have flashcards at home maybe. Google Images, pop those Google Images into a PowerPoint. Got to be visual as possible. Keep your language as visual as possible. Do you see Nearpod there? If you don't have any resources, Nearpod is a very cool way of creating online lessons that are visual. It's very easy to use, and the advantage of doing something like this over PowerPoint, Nearpod has like built-in activities that you can use, like little matching activities, memory games, and things like that. It's a very cool way to make a lesson. All right. I really wish I had, well, maybe I can do this. Let me open up something in the background. Because I am using a webinar mode here, I don't have the interactive whiteboard on Zoom. So let me try something a little bit different. And I hope it works without crashing my computer because I'm gonna open up something different. Let me stop sharing that and share. Oh, there we go. Please don't crash, please don't crash. I hope what you're looking at, oh, it says it's not responding. What I'm trying to do here is open up WordPad or Notepad. If you need to write something for your students, I'm a huge fan of just opening up WordPad or Notepad, sharing that screen with your students and just typing it in there. And it's not working right now, and I hope that's not killing my webinar right here. So let me go back to my presentation. Sorry that doesn't work. I think my computer is on my last leg of RAM. But the reason I mention this for instructions, for instructions, when you want your students to do something, if you want students to talk to each other, for example, it's better to visualize your instructions for them. So don't just tell your students what you want them to do. Open up WordPad and type, Number one, talk to your partner, for example. Number two, take notes. I write my instructions for the activity and I share it with my students so they can see exactly what I want them to do. And that's the same in a real classroom. When I'm giving instructions for an activity, I don't just say it for my students. I'm not just giving oral instructions. I write my instructions on the board. Be as visual as possible. Don't assume that your students understand just spoken instructions. I promise they don't, especially young kids. Your instructional language should be simple and consistent. What I mean by that is if, for example, you're drilling students, you want them to repeat what you are saying. You need to keep it simple and you need to keep it consistent. So if I wanted my students to repeat, I would probably say, repeat after me, or just repeat. What is it? Steak. Repeat, steak. Repeat, salad. Repeat, soup. I'm using the same word. I'm just saying repeat, repeat, repeat again and again. Now, if I'm teaching younger students and I try to say, okay, everybody, can you please repeat after me? What is it? That's a little bit too fast. That's very, very, very long-winded instructions. That's way too long. Your students don't understand what you want. If you're giving really long instructions, your students won't understand you. If you want your students to talk together, Phương, ask, Laum, number one. So my language for my lesson, my language is, what do you want? I want French fries. What do you want? I want salad. Now I want Phương to ask Laum. Okay, so keep my language consistent. Phương, ask the question. Phương, ask Laum. What do you want? Now you hope your students can understand you. They actually do it. Phương asks Laum. Now the problem is if you're not consistent, if you say, okay, Phương, could you please ask Laum the question? Those instructions are long and they're not simple and I've changed my words. Keep your instructional language very simple, very consistent, and very clear. Somebody mentioned this before, model your activities. Model your activities. If you've got like a question and answer and you want your students to question and answer, so my structure for this lesson was, what do you want? I want. I want my students to do this online with me. I want 2 students to do it, but I can do this by myself first. I can model this with myself, right? So I'm going to be 2 people. Phương, what do you want? Oh, I want French fries. Is that French fries? That's salad. I want salad. All right. Now do it again. Phương, ask Nam. Okay. What do you want? I want salad. Model your activities, show your students what the activity is before you actually ask them to do it. Pair work. Pair work equals more student talking time. Just a simple activity like that. Now you could do teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. Phương, what is it? And then Phương answers your question, great. Laum, what is it? Great. Now again, I would probably be using the target structure. Laum, what do you want? And hopefully he answers, I want salad. Phương, what do you want? I want steak. Now that's teacher-student mode, just teacher-student, but could you get 2 students to do that together? Sure you can. It's just Phương, ask Laum. By doing that, by having 2 students work together, you're cutting down on your teacher talking time and you're maximizing student talking time. I'm going to try one more thing here just to keep things visual. I mentioned, do you guys remember the wheel? I hope that showed for you before. The wheel of names that I showed you. I'm going to try to do this without crashing my computer. Can everybody still see me here? I hope. Turn off the sound. All right, it should be sharing. And it's locking up. All right, I hope you can all see that wheel that I showed you before. Okay, now I want to show you something cool. And because my computer is because my computer is lagging a little bit, I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but something that I created in literally 2 seconds before this webinar, and I hope it's going to work. Something that you can do, and it's a really cool way of presenting language here. You can actually import pictures into the wheel. Great, so all of my pictures, I just took 1 minute, I Google imaged all of these pictures, and I popped them into this wheelofnames.com. Now, it's a really cool way to do activities. So again, like my structure was, what do you want? I want. So I could do this with my students. All right, Fung, this is gonna be, you can do it as a game. I mean, divide your class in half, boys and girls, whatever. Girls, you're first. So I'm gonna spin the wheel. I'm gonna spin the wheel. Girls, 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 what do you want? And then you need to get that answer right. I want eggs. So this is a really cool tool. And another cool thing that I've got here, and I'm gonna try it. If I crash, I'm sorry. I am gonna try it anyway though, because I think it's cool, and it's a cool website that I can show you. And I am gonna go full mode. This is a PowerPoint. This is a PowerPoint. Okay, let me stop that and let me come over to my PowerPoint. So this is, can you guys see what I'm looking at here, I hope? This is a PowerPoint. My chat screen is kind of locked up here. You can download templates from this website. This is called gamesforesl.com. Gamesforesl.com. You can download PowerPoint templates. And this is just a matching game template. So they give you the PowerPoint, and then you just fill it in, like this one here. You just put pictures in. 5 minutes, okay. I'm getting the 5 minutes wave here. I'm gonna try to, all right, there we go. Hopefully this works. All right, great. So this took 2 seconds. I downloaded Google Images. Divide your students into teams. Have one team call out a couple numbers here. Number 1, and let's say, oh, number 9. Is it a match? That is not a match. So you're gonna hide it. And again, my computer is locking up here. Just gotta click on that to hide it. So team 2, it's your turn. You're just looking for matches. 1 and 5, great, we found a match. Now don't just show PowerPoints and play a game. Get your students using that language. That's part of creating a student-centered class. Make it visual, but get your students repeating it. So everybody, what do you want? And they have to say it, I want eggs. Yes, you can add sounds to that if you want. The lesson that I am learning right now, though, as I do this webinar, the lesson that I'm learning here is that you need, unless you've got like a really powerful computer, the more you share, the more programs that you open, the bigger the chance there is of locking your system up. I think my computer is on its last little thread of RAM here, and I think it's gonna die. So I'm not gonna do any more. But you can use sound effects if you want. Let me just very quickly go back to my last couple slides here. That. Oh, and I think Mr. Duck has a note there about student mode. Type everybody's speech and responses into WordPad and share the screen. That's a really good idea. That's a method of keeping notes. Like if you had a real whiteboard or a mini whiteboard, you could do it there. But yeah, typing it up into like WordPad and sharing that with your students, that's really cool. It's a really cool idea. So let me quickly go through. TPR, don't forget, your students are going to be in their chairs, but you can still use TPR. So for example, I could do an activity here. The activity is when my students see the word, let's say steak. When I show the word steak, they have to stand up, they have to jump up. They have to jump up. All right, so I'm gonna just start cycling through flashcards. And they have to answer my questions. So when they see steak, they stand up, okay? So here, let me go, what do you want? And they're still sitting here, they're just answering questions. I want eggs. What do you want? Oh, it's upside down. What do you want? I want French fries. What do you want? And your student should jump up. I want steak. You could have them turn around. Don't forget, even though you're teaching online, get your students moving around. Get them, you could do scavenger hunts. You can have them use things around them. You got to keep them busy, keep them entertained. Like a lot of teachers think like, oh, my job isn't entertainment, it's teaching, and fair enough. But there's no reason that you can't mix the two, because if you're not entertaining, if you are boring, your students are going to be bored. So you do have to be entertaining. That doesn't mean that you're not a teacher. It doesn't mean that you're not being educational. There's room for both. Okay, there's definitely room for both. So I wish I could go back to my first slide there. The real thing that I wanted to kind of impress upon you and share with you today is that you need to be visual, you need to be enthusiastic, you need to be dynamic, you need to keep moving and keep your lessons very interactive, share images, go back. Let me actually stop sharing here because I want to practice what I preach. Share your screen, get your students using the language, do something different. Then go back, share your screen again, get another activity, do something different. Keep it moving, keep your lesson moving, keep your students engaged, get their attention. Keep their attention. And I think that's all I have time for here. That's over an hour, oh my God. That's probably the last point I should say, that is that your online classes might go faster than you realize. So thank you for tuning in here. We're gonna go to question and answer mode for about 10 minutes. So I hope you found that useful. I hope I didn't speak too fast and lose you. It was great to interact with you guys on the chat screen. I hope you got some good tips or advice out of here. And Kwok is back here. So Kwok is gonna manage the question and answer part of this. So if you got any questions, Kwok, go ahead.
Yes, there are some questions in the Q&A tab, Stephen. You can see that.
There we go. So Yim, can you get a recording of this webinar? That's not a question I can answer. Kwok, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'll answer this one. Yeah, we will have this one record and post it on our website.
Okay.
Right.
A question there about English communication for adults. You know what's funny? For adult classes, it's almost the same thing as teaching kids. You're keeping things visual, you're using images, you're using an eye tool if you have eye tools, you're getting close to the camera. I think almost everything that I shared with you today, even though this was kind of geared more for young learners, you can do this. You can do this with adults too. You really can. Specifically for adults, you know, one of the things that I like doing with adults, because they're a little bit more mature and I trust them a little bit more, I think you can focus a little bit more on, you don't just have to stay super locked into your lesson. If you find communication going in a different direction and your students are interested and they're answering you and they're speaking about it, great. It's motivation. You want your students interested in your topic, because that means you're engaging your students and it's more student-centered. So if you're teaching about food, for example, and you're teaching adults and your adults started talking about like restaurants, go in that direction. Let them go in that direction. I think you have a little bit more room and more flexibility with adults. That's a good question. Thank you, Wang. Anonymous attendee. What if I use simple language to give instructions, but your students still didn't get it? I think this is where modeling comes in really, really, really well here. It's the same with like a real classroom. When you try to set up an activity and your students don't do it, maybe they just kind of look around at each other or something like that, that usually means that you probably spoke too much and you didn't visualize what you wanted your students to do. And visualizing, by visualizing, I mean demonstrating the activity. You got to demonstrate every single thing that you want your students to do. And that might mean like you take on the role of teacher and students. So I'm the teacher. Repeat, steak, steak. I'm the teacher. What was it? Salad, salad. Take on two roles, model the activity for your students, even if it's instructional language. Very good question there. I'm sure there's probably more here. Let me go in there. Somebody mentioned an annotate function. This is for the whiteboard, on the shared whiteboard, or when you're sharing your screen. Why is it off? I don't know if you're a VUS teacher or not. You have to be careful with annotations and with giving your students that power, because your students can kind of take control of what you are doing on your share screen. And young learners, I'm not sure I would give them that power. That question I just answered about adults, yeah, okay, maybe you can interact with them a little bit more with the annotate function. With younger students, I'm not sure I would give them that power. A question there about a transition system. The one that I use, and I use this in the physical classroom as well as my online classroom. The one that I mentioned is the finger on the nose. Once you introduce that system, it seems to work very well. Also, like in an online classroom, and this probably, in a real classroom, this probably wouldn't work well in an online environment. I'm just silent. I'm just quiet. And your students notice that you're being quiet. That means, oh, okay, we're doing something different. It's time to shut up. Something I think you could do for a transition system is a timer. Use a timer. And I'm not going to share my screen here because I'm going to crash it, I'm sure. If you want your students' attention, go to google.com, type in timer, put 5 seconds on the timer. All of your students can see it. At the end of 5 seconds, you should have their attention. You could also go to YouTube and type in timer, and it's like you could have a bomb timer. It's a ticking time bomb. How to organize pairs and groups effectively in online classes if there's only the teacher. It depends on the age group. You can't use breakout rooms with little kids. You just can't. You can't trust little kids to go into a breakout room and do that. The only thing that you can do is you can do it teacher, student, teacher, student, teacher, student. You can model the activity if you're doing like a question and answer thing. You can model that for your students, and then that should have students working in pairs. You just show them the flashcard, for example, and then it's question and answer. And then that's where mute controls are also very useful. If you want your students working in pairs, I would probably mute everybody else that you don't want working. Only open up the microphone for the 2 students that you want working. They do it, great. Mute those 2 students and now go to 2 more. Unmute those students. I use the mute controls a lot when I'm monitoring pair activity. And you know, I'll actually mention that in terms of drilling. In a real classroom, when you do choral drilling, your students fall into a rhythm. So for example, maybe it was, I want salad, and then you hear it and there's like a rhythm to it. Online, you don't really get that rhythm. So one of the things that you can do, you know, back in the day, there's a method for learning a language, and maybe you're driving in your car and you're trying to learn Spanish, and you could just do like an audio book or something like that. It was audio lessons, and so you would hear something and you just have to repeat it to yourself. You can still use that right now. You can mute everybody. You say it, and they have to repeat it. But they're repeating it to themselves. They should be saying it. You can unmute 1 student at a time, so only 1 student is heard, but you can still use that technique. Techniques for teaching maths and science. SEMA, that is a very difficult question to answer because I hate math and I hate science. You know what I would say? I would try to keep things as student-centered as possible as well. Short little activities, but then you got to move on to the next activity. I don't really have a lot of advice for math and science because I couldn't tell you 2 + 2. I couldn't. So sorry, I can't answer that. You know what I've actually used? I use Khan Academy. I get a lot of ideas from Khan Academy. That's Khan. It's a good YouTube series. How can miming be done in front of a laptop screen? Give me a word that you want to mime. Oh, I'm not in the chat anymore. I don't know if that's still active. It depends on.
You
Sorry?
can turn it on, Stephen.
Okay, my chat is back.
Yeah.
Is there any word that you would want me to mime and I can try? Don't be shy. I did the one before with like big and bigger or small, tiny. I mean, you can do all that. You can mime. All the verbs are pretty easy to mime, even like thinking and jump, run. All the action verbs are okay.
Maybe run or walk.
Dance. Oh, come on. Dance would be the easiest one to mime. I'm not going to do it for you. Don't trick me into dancing for you. Some of the words are easier than others to mime, but that's kind of where video comes in handy. If you don't think you can mime it, well, that's what YouTube is for. Suggested activities with big size classes. 40 students in an online class. That is very, 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 very hard, Kate. That is very hard. I think some of it depends on the age group, if you have TAs or not. This is where I would have TAs take a group. I would divide it maybe. If you got 2 TAs, then maybe you could take, I don't know, maybe each one can take a group of students. 40 students is hard. Gosh, I don't even know. I would incorporate a lot of drilling, I think, and hope that your students are doing it. Put them all on mute and drill and drill. Games and activities where they are divided up into teams. That would be good. Culture, mime culture. Fiona, I would not mime culture. I would use pictures for culture. And I'll tell you why, because if I tried miming culture, I'd probably waste about 10 minutes trying to mime it, and that would not be an effective use of class time. I think I could probably show it better through pictures and perhaps through examples. I'd probably use examples for that. That's one of those that I wouldn't mime. Kate, that's a very, you know what, I'll tell you what, I'll probably try to do another webinar later on, maybe dealing with bigger class sizes. Thank you for that question. I'm sorry I don't have a really good answer for it. Yeah, thank you, Vung. I think Vung, culture equals video. Vung, teaching a set of vocabulary items, 6 words. What do you think is better, choral or individual? Both. I start choral, and then I move into individual. So I would do both, definitely. And one of the things I didn't mention, actually, and I should have mentioned this, I kind of forgot, is that in a real class, I start with vocabulary, and then I move on to longer structures after some time. In an online class, I think I want my students practicing the structures a little bit earlier in my lesson, almost immediately, because 1 hour is not a lot of time. So my structure in my sample lesson was, what do you want? I want. When I'm presenting my vocabulary, I would probably start choral drilling with the structure too. So maybe it's soup, soup, I want soup. And then they have to choral drill that with me. Steak, steak, I want steak. So this would be choral drilling for everybody. And then after I finish maybe a round of that, I'd be like, okay, I'd start calling on individual students to do it. Yeah, it's repeating it to yourself just like a radio. Yeah.
Stephen, I don't think we have enough time to answer all the questions here.
Okay.
So I would choose a few questions related to our topic today. Right?
Sure.
Okay, there's questions, good questions about from Kai-Chi. How about the reward system we can use for the online classes? Do you have any recommendation?
A reward system, that's a very good question, and I didn't have time to get into this. There is a website called, I think it's classdojo.com or classroomdojo.com, and you can use this in a simple way. or a more powerful way. If you've got a class that is yours and you're going to have that class for a long time, I would create a virtual class in Class Dojo, give all the students names, give them little avatars. There's little like monster avatars that you can give your Class Dojo, thank you. You can give your students little avatars and they can choose them. And you can actually, if you want to use it in a simple way, you just share that website, that screen as you're teaching. And if you want to reward your student for example, participating, you click on that student's avatar, and then you can choose something to reward them for, like whether it's participating or whatever it is, you can reward them right there. You click on it and like it's like a little animation thing that it'll do, and students get to see it. It feels kind of cool for them because everybody got to see that they were rewarded right there. So Class Dojo is a really cool way of rewarding students and getting them to see it. For using it in a more powerful way, you can actually give parents an account with it. So every time your students and or the parents of the students can log in and they can see how much their student was rewarded for that particular class, and it keeps track of all of it for you. It's a very good question.
Yeah, thanks. Another question is, student insists in not saying anything or just giving us like, I don't know, after being asked so many times. So should we ignore them or move on? Should we ignore them and move on?
That's a really good question, and I think it depends a little bit about what you're trying to do and how well you know that student. I would start with giving them a question that you know that they can answer, and if they are not answering a question that you know that they can answer, that is an issue that you might have to address privately with that student, because you don't want to talk to them in front of everybody and say, hey, what's going on? You can't do that in front of everybody. I might open up like a chat window after class and say, and talk to them about why. You might have to get a parent involved. It depends on the age of the student. Here's something that happens though. I see this more often than not. It's students that actually do know how to answer the question and they just don't want to. Or the teacher is not being clear. So you have to make sure that your student is understanding the question that you want answered. And a lot of times teachers tend to overestimate how much they are being understood by the students. So rephrase the question, ask the question to another student, get that sample answer. It's like modeling it, right? And then go back to that student. I would keep going back to the student. I wouldn't spend 5 minutes saying like, just repeating the question. I'd model it, go back to that student, give it another try. Doesn't work, try another student, go back to that student. And if it's continual, I don't know, then I would probably do it privately, figure out outside of the class what's going on. Good question.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. There are a few more questions about different techniques teaching different kind of students, and also about like teaching grammar or teaching skills. So I believe that if you guys register for our upcoming webinars, this question will be answered. Okay, so I think it's time for us. So I would like to thank Stephen and thank all of you who attended our webinar today. We hope that you enjoy our webinar and we'll be able to apply a few ideas to your teaching practice. Before we finish, please be reminded of the following things. I'd like to share my screen with you. Wait a second. I don't know where my, okay. So I'm going to tap the links for the survey about this webinar and the link to download your certificate of participation on the chat box. You can copy the links and paste it into your browsers.
Thank you, everybody. I'm still looking at the chat here. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope it was useful. I hope so.
Okay, it is. You can see it on the chat box now. And these links are available for only 24 hours for registered attendees. Also, please have a look at our website for the upcoming webinars and registration information. We still have a lot of webinars coming up from now until May. Okay.
Oh, Kwok, can I say one more thing, Kwok?
Yes.
We had that question before about rewarding students. I didn't put this into my workshop here, but something that you can do, and I would use this as a reward system. You have access to filters. There's something called Snap Camera. And this is a kind of a cool way to reward your students. It's funny, it's visual, it's dynamic. I mean, you can choose any kind of filter that you want and apply it. So right now I should be a potato. Summer lights. I mean, you can, I'm gonna become a woman, I think, right now here with my twin. There we go. Oh my goodness, look at that. If your students do an activity well, I reward them with filters and students love it. So that's called Snap Camera. I think it's a cool tool that you can use.
Thanks, David. Sorry. Okay, now you can see my screen here. Right, so here are the links for the survey and certificate. All right, so thank you, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye and stay safe.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye.
VUS, your English, your future.